Dear learners, welcome to the NIOS studios. I am Dr. Shivani Datta from University of Delhi and I am here to talk about growth and development. And in this lesson, we would be focusing on the concept of development along with its principles. Now, what do you understand by development? Development refers to qualitative changes in the body as well as changes in the behavior and attitude of an individual. Now, it is very important to note that physical growth that we talk about is measurable quantitatively. That means increase in height, weight, change of body proportions could be easily quantified in terms of centimeters, inches, kilograms, grams, and so on. However, there are certain changes such as cognitive or socio-emotional maturity which may not be measured in quantitative terms. For instance, it's very difficult to quantify changes in a child's socio-emotional maturity. It can't be reduced to numbers. You can't be saying that a child was 10% socially mature a month back and now the child is 90% socially or emotionally mature. Instead, one can gain a qualitative insight into the changes by observing changes in the child's behavior. For instance, there might be a child who used to cry a lot or maybe stop eating or throw a tantrum when the parents used to leave for work. But now there's a change in child's behavior as he or she has stopped engaging in any kind of emotional outburst. The child doesn't cry now, the child doesn't throw tantrums, eats well, sleeps well, and you can actually see a growing sense of socio-emotional maturity and understanding that although the parents are going out for work, they are going to come back to the child. So, when you talk about development in these domains, linguistic or socio-emotional, these developments can be understood using qualitative markers. Indirectly, it could be gauged through behavior, attitude changes, etc. Now we come to various principles of development. Now that we've understood what is the concept of development and how it is different from growth, there are certain principles guiding development and these are more or less common across all the children. Now we come to the first basic principle of development, which says that development is continuous and involves changes. Now, what do you understand by this? Development is never erratic. It never happens in bits and spurts. It's always a continuous process. For instance, you won't be able to spot an infant who straight away starts running without going through the phases of sitting with support, without support, crawling, standing, and so on. So, the changes are going to happen very smoothly and continuously. The second very important principle is development is sequential. Now, what do you understand by sequential? If I ask you, or have you ever seen a child who starts walking and running first and then starts sitting? No. The answer is no. Why? Because development will always follow a particular sequence of events. Now, sequential patterns are primarily of two types. You have cephalocaudal and you have proximodistal pattern. Now, what is meant by that? Cephalocaudal means head to tail. That means the development in the head region comes first, followed by the trunk region, followed by the leg region. That's the pattern that is followed across all the children. The second pattern is proximodistal. Now, what do you understand by proximodistal? Proximodistal means near to far. When I say near, I mean the core of the body. That is the reason the head and the trunk region develops first, and then you see the rudimentary limb buds emerging in a fetus, followed by hands and fingers. Now, interestingly, that's the reason a child acquires gross motor skills first, which require the movement of arms and hands, and fine motor skills which require finger dexterity, for instance, holding a pen or holding a pencil, would be coming later on because that's how the sequence of development has been wired. The next important thing that we need to consider here is, apart from physical and motor development, there are predictable patterns in other domains also. Although we've given the example from a physical domain, other domains also follow predictable patterns or sequences. For instance, Initially, children's thinking is built on concrete objects. They require something tangible to understand concepts. They require something concrete which they can manipulate, they can hold on to, something which is tangible in order to understand the concepts behind it. Later on, they are capable of abstract ideas. For instance, during the initial years, the child does not understand the concept of honesty, justice. These are abstract ideas. Initially, the child will not be equipped to do mental calculations or mental problem solving. They require something concrete to understand things. That's the reason during the initial years, children are taught concepts using concrete objects. You actually see children playing with building blocks, abacus which has different beads on a string, and the child can move the beads and understand the concept of numbers. And for instance, basic mathematical operation like addition is taught using balls or blocks or balloon. Like a child could be told that this is one balloon, and if another balloon is added, how many balloons do you have? The child, since during initial years banks on concrete processing or concrete thoughts, would be requiring concrete objects to manipulate them, handle them, and understand that this is 1, this is 2. So when you add 1 plus 1, it becomes 2. Later on, interestingly, these external objects get replaced with fingers. So you might have seen children counting on fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And later on, with the development of abstract thinking, the child does not need concrete objects, neither external objects nor fingers. The child is capable to do mental arithmetic. If I ask you what is 10 plus 10, you don't need objects to do the calculation. You can do that mentally because you have arrived at that level of development where you are capable of abstract processing of information. The next important principle is development is a product of maturation and learning. Now, what do you understand by this? Normally, most children learn to sit around the age of 6 months. They can stand while holding when they are 8 or 9 months old. They can take their first steps when they are around 9 to 12 months of age. And they in fact start walking quite independently by the time they are 13 to 15 months of age. So under normal circumstances, it seems that all children are programmed or have the potential to sit, stand and walk. But it's important to understand that they can perform these particular tasks, although they have the potential and they are predisposed to walk and stand and talk, but they would be able to do it only when they acquire certain physical and mental maturity, clearly indicating that your development is a product of maturation and learning. It will become manifested only when you have the prerequisite maturation for learning to have any kind of impact. The next important principle says development involves individual differences. Now, it is very interesting that every child is unique and different. No two children are alike, not even twins. They are very unique, they are idiosyncratic, they are very different, they have different skills, different talents, different qualities. Although the sequence of development is fairly uniform, we've just discussed, the pattern, the sequence is predetermined and it is common to all children. However, the rate and pace of achieving these milestones may vary from one child to the other child. So as elders, as caregivers, as parents, as teachers, it is very important to appreciate and respect that children will have their own unique growth trajectories. Another principle of development that needs to be kept in mind is development involves unified growth. We've been talking about different domains, be it sensory motor, be it cognitive, be it language, be it socio-emotional and so on. These domains are distinct. However, they are tied together. The development of one affects the other and in turn gets affected by others. Any problem in one aspect of development is likely to affect others. For instance, there might be a child who's been chronically ill. Now, chances are very high that because of that illness, the parents would try to provide extra protective and extra controlled environment, fearing that the child might fall ill again. For instance, they might be reluctant to let the child crawl on the floor, or maybe hold objects or put the objects in the mouth. Now, what happens due to this restrained and restrictive environment? It may lead to a delay in physical motor development because the child is not exploring. The child is not manipulating the objects in the environment, which speeds up this physical motor development, this sensory motor progress. Now, because of this delay in physical motor development, the child may not be able to participate in physical activities, may not be able to go to the park and play with others, may not be able to mingle with other children because of that. So ultimately what happens, this restriction affects all other aspects of development as well. Because of restricted communication and interaction and exchanges, the language and cognitive domain gets impacted because the child is not engaging in play, is not engaging in group activities, is not interacting with other kids that freely. The social emotional development gets hampered. So now we know how development is, all the domains is intricately linked. It is not about development in one domain, it is about a unified and holistic growth. So in this lecture, we have learned about the basic principles of development, such as development being continuous, sequential, individual specific, leading to a unified growth and being a product of maturation as well as learning. Thank you.